These are the things the fitness industry has been telling you about bulking for over 60 years, and most of them are wrong. What follows is what the science actually says about natural muscle building, what the industry conveniently leaves out, and why millions of people spend months grinding through a bulk only to end up in roughly the same place they started. No fluff, no supplement ads, no gym mythology, just the facts. Starting at the beginning makes sense here, because most people jump into bulking without really understanding what it is or why it exists in the first place. Bulking is the practice of intentionally eating more calories than you burn, a caloric surplus above your TDE or total daily energy expenditure, while doing resistance training with progressive overload, with the goal of maximizing muscle hypertrophy. The logic is that your body needs extra fuel to build new tissue. There is truth in that idea, but the way most people execute it is where things fall apart. What most people never hear is that the bulk and cut cycle as a mainstream fitness strategy rose to prominence in the 1960s, when bodybuilding culture exploded and spread into gyms around the world, meaning this approach has been treated as gospel for over 6 decades. And in those 6 decades, a lot of what circulates as advice has almost nothing to do with what peer-reviewed research actually supports. This is the number that changes everything, and it is the first thing anyone serious about building muscle deserves to know up front. The scale going up does not mean muscle is going up proportionally. And once that clicks, everything else starts to make sense. Based on research from Alan Aragon, Casey Butt, and Brad Schoenfeld, 3 of the most cited names in natural muscle growth science, the numbers break down like this. In your first year of training, when your potential for growth sits at its absolute highest, the average beginner can gain roughly 20 to 25 pounds of muscle across a full year, which works out to about 2 pounds per month. And that sounds reasonable, maybe even encouraging, until you see what happens next. By year 2, that rate drops to roughly 10 to 12 pounds per year, about 1 pound per month, and year 3 brings it down further to 5 to 6 pounds annually. And by year 4 and beyond, some lifters are gaining just 2 to 3 pounds of actual muscle across the entire year. Casey Butt's research puts a ceiling on it that most people never want to hear. Most men can naturally gain between 40 and 50 pounds of muscle across their entire lifetimes, and for most women, that number sits around 20 to 25 pounds total. That is your lifetime of natural gains. All of it assuming consistent training, good nutrition, and proper recovery, landing somewhere in that range. And this is where it gets important. When someone says they bulked up and gained 20 pounds in 3 months, what actually happened is a combination of muscle, fat, water, and glycogen, and the muscle portion represents a fraction of that total. The biology simply does not allow for 20 pounds of pure muscle in a 90-day window, not naturally, not ever. None of this is meant to discourage anyone, but calibrating expectations correctly is the only thing that leads to smart decisions. Knowing how slowly muscle actually grows makes the next part land a lot harder. A common belief in gym culture holds that the more you eat, the more muscle you build, and that eating big is the path to getting big. But the science tells a completely different story. Muscle protein synthesis, the process by which the body actually builds new tissue, runs up against a biological ceiling regardless of how many calories come in, and anything above that ceiling does not convert into muscle. It converts into fat. Dr. Eric Helms, one of the most respected researchers in natural bodybuilding, led a study that tested this directly, taking 21 resistance-trained individuals and splitting them into 3 groups, one eating at maintenance, one at a 5% caloric surplus, and one at a 15% caloric surplus, running the experiment over 8 weeks, and the result was unambiguous. Faster weight gain in the higher surplus group primarily increased fat accumulation, not muscle thickness, not strength gains, just more fat, more food, same muscle, more fat. What the research consistently supports is a lean bulking approach, a surplus of 250 to 500 calories above maintenance. That's exactly how my bulking program is structured. Link is in the description. That's enough to fuel muscle growth without flooding the body with energy it cannot use for that purpose. And the reason the size of the surplus matters so much comes down to what follows. Every pound of unnecessary fat gained during a bulk is a pound that has to be cut away later, and that costs time, energy, and months of difficult dieting. Dirty bulking is what happens when people hear eat in a surplus and interpret it as eat everything in massive quantities, fast food, processed snacks, sugary drinks, all of it justified under the logic that more calories equals more muscle, and none of that logic holds up under scrutiny. Starting with the hormonal picture, excess body fat, particularly the visceral kind stored around the organs, reduces testosterone and raises estrogen levels, and those are precisely the hormonal conditions that work against muscle development. meaning dirty bulking can actively undermine the goal it is supposed to serve. The long-term health consequences compound that problem considerably, because rapid weight gain of the dirty bulk variety contributes to insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction, raises the risk of type 2 diabetes, drives up LDL cholesterol, increases blood pressure, and promotes chronic inflammation through sustained consumption of processed foods high in saturated fats, added sugars, and sodium. And then there is the insulin sensitivity piece, which is the one that surprises most people. Decreased insulin sensitivity challenges the body's ability to gain muscle, so dirty bulking, sustained long enough, makes it harder to build the very thing you are eating to build. The bottom line the research delivers is this: dirty bulking does not accelerate muscle growth beyond what a moderate caloric surplus achieves, because muscle protein synthesis has natural limits that no calorie count can override, and excessive calories simply become fat. Almost nobody in fitness culture talks about this directly, and the gap in that conversation costs people months of wasted effort. According to Dr. Jacob Wilson, a PhD and certified strength and conditioning specialist who leads the Applied Science and Performance Institute, bulking for longer than 12 weeks rarely delivers meaningful returns. And the reason is straightforward: muscle growth slows as the body adapts, which means extended bulking phases deliver diminishing muscle returns, while fat accumulation continues at the same pace. For most lifters, the research points to a bulking phase somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks as the productive window, during which a well-executed controlled surplus can yield around 6 to 8 pounds of lean mass. And once that window closes, the move is to gradually reduce calories back to maintenance by no more than 250 to 500 calories daily, while keeping protein intake high to protect what was built. The problem is that most people bulk for 5, 6, even 7 months, gain a significant amount of fat alongside whatever muscle was built, and then spend the next 5 months trying to cut it off. And after a full year of this effort, the mirror often shows almost the same body that was there 12 months earlier. The cycle traps people for years, and understanding the optimal duration is one of the simplest ways to break out of it. My program runs that exact window, structured, timed, no guessing. Link below. Here is something the "you must bulk to build muscle" crowd consistently avoids addressing. A meaningful portion of people genuinely do not need to bulk. Anyone carrying excess body fat, roughly above 15% for men and above 20% for women, can build muscle and lose body fat simultaneously through resistance training on a higher protein diet, a strategy known as body recomposition or maiden gaining, and studies on overweight and obese subjects confirmed exactly that outcome. This is not a fringe theory. The research supports it. Absolute beginners represent another group where traditional bulking is often unnecessary, because people just starting resistance training are primed to respond to the training stimulus regardless of whether a significant caloric surplus exists. And the reason is that they sit far below their genetic potential for muscle mass, giving the body strong biological motivation to build without needing extra fuel. Before committing to a months-long bulk, the honest question is, where are you actually starting from? For someone with meaningful body fat to lose, a traditional bulk is probably not the first move, and the science gives clear permission to build muscle and improve body composition at the same time. This deserves a clear-eyed look, because what gets sold to people planning a bulk and what the evidence actually supports are two very different things. Supplement companies make claims about muscle-building results that the research consistently fails to back up at the levels they suggest, and the gap between the marketing and the data is wide enough to matter financially and physically. Creatine stands out as the one supplement with genuine evidence behind it. Research confirms it is safe for long-term use. Studies show it can increase muscle mass gains by 5 to 15% compared to training without it. And the dosing protocol is simple: 3 to 5 grams per day with no loading phase required. But a systematic review and meta-analysis of creatine studies found that combined with resistance training, it increased lean body mass in young men by around 1 kilogram total, which is a real and meaningful gain, but it is also a long way from the transformation the packaging tends to imply. Protein supplementation fills a legitimate gap for people who cannot hit their daily targets through whole food alone, and the research-supported range is 0.6 to 0.9 grams of protein per pound of body weight daily. But protein powder is a delivery mechanism for a macronutrient, not a growth accelerator, and the distinction matters when evaluating what to spend money on. This section belongs in the conversation about bulking more than most people realize, and the research connecting physique-focused cycling to psychological harm is more developed than the fitness community generally acknowledges. Bulk and cut cycles and the obsession with building muscle share a documented relationship with a condition called muscle dysmorphia, sometimes referred to as bigorexia or reverse anorexia, a subtype of body dysmorphic disorder where individuals hold an exaggerated belief that their body is too small or insufficiently muscular, even when their physique is objectively normal or exceptional, and this condition received official recognition in the DSM-5 in 2013. People living with muscle dysmorphia typically spend over 3 hours daily thinking about increasing their muscularity, and roughly half of them carry poor or no insight into the fact that their perceptions do not reflect reality, while the disorder connects clinically to elevated rates of depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, and suicide attempts. A study published in Eating and Weight Disorders found that engagement in bulk and cut cycles correlated with a stronger drive for muscularity and more severe eating disorder and muscle dysmorphia, psychopathology, across the sample, meaning the cycle itself functions as a risk factor in the research. A separate study in the American Journal of Psychiatry found that male bodybuilders reported significantly greater body dissatisfaction, higher drives for bulk and thinness, and stronger bulimic tendencies than runners or martial artists. The point here is not that bulking causes muscle dysmorphia, but that a documented relationship exists between extreme physique-focused cycling and disordered thinking about the body. And knowing that relationship exists before going deep into this world is information worth having. Stepping back and looking at the full picture of what repeated bulk and cut cycles do to the body over time reveals a pattern that the research describes with some consistency. Frequent and drastic weight fluctuations of the kind these cycles produce can increase the risk of metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions including high cholesterol and cardiovascular disease occurring simultaneously, and that risk accumulates with each cycle repeated. On the cutting side, losing weight faster than about 1 pound per week, which most people running a bulk and cut cycle aim for during the cut phase, raises cortisol and lowers testosterone production. And that hormonal shift directly impairs the body's ability to maintain and grow muscle tissue, meaning the aggressive cut erodes the very gains the bulk was meant to produce. And in practice, the research confirms what many people experience but rarely admit. A significant number of people complete a full bulk and cut cycle and find themselves at the same weight and body composition they started with, sometimes worse, having gained fat, struggled through a long cut to remove it, and arrived back at the beginning with months of effort behind them and nothing to show for it. Bringing all of this together into something actionable is the whole point. So here's what the research consistently supports. For someone relatively new to lifting, a more aggressive approach to weight gain during a bulk makes sense because the potential for muscle growth sits at its highest early in a training career, and those early years represent a window that closes permanently, so taking advantage of that window is worth doing intentionally. For an experienced lifter who has been training for several years, a conservative approach is not just recommended, but is the only approach that makes biological sense, because proximity to genetic potential means muscle growth is slower and fat accumulation is not, and a tightly controlled surplus of 250 to 500 calories does the job without the costly side effects. Keeping protein at 0.6 to 0.9 grams per pound of body weight daily, running the bulk for 6 to 12 weeks rather than stretching it across half a year, and eating food that supports insulin sensitivity and hormonal health rather than undermining it. These are not advanced strategies. They are the basics, and the research has been pointing at them consistently, while gym culture has been pointing in a different direction. The areas where research is still developing, things like protein timing and rest intervals between sets, remain genuinely uncertain, which is exactly why the fundamentals deserve more attention than the details that have yet to be settled. The truth about bulking that the fitness industry does not lead with is this: eating more does not cause the body to build muscle faster, because the biology has a ceiling that no calorie surplus can raise. What works is eating with enough precision to support muscle growth, training with enough consistency to keep driving adaptation, and running the bulk for a duration that matches what the body can actually do in that window, rather than what feels ambitious on paper. Bulking done with a controlled surplus, a realistic timeline, and an honest understanding of what the scale actually reflects is a legitimate and effective approach. The version that gets sold, the one where you eat everything, gain as much weight as possible, and grind through a brutal cut afterward, that version is not optimized for muscle. It is optimized for keeping people in a cycle they feel compelled to restart every year. Knowing the difference between those two things is where real progress starts. If you want it done for you, the program is in the description, built around everything you just heard. I'll see you on the other side.